You've had a really busy time, talking a lot post this decision from the Supreme Court. It must. Have you found the words? Yesterday you said it was difficult to sum up how you felt outside the Supreme Court. You'd had a lot of time to think about it, but have you found the words to describe how this feels?
Well, I've had 4 hours sleep now. It's sinking in. I actually found out the decision 24 hours ahead of the announcement in court, so I didn't quite have the drama of the announcement in court and going wow, because I knew what it was already. But yeah, I mean, I'm still wondering whether I need to email my probation officer to see whether I should be meeting her next week. But it does feel a little more real today than it felt before. I think actually having the piece of paper in your hand makes it more real. Yeah. And
so this has made a huge difference to you. Clearly, it will perhaps make a difference to others who found themselves in a similar position. Have you talked to any of the other traders who were also convicted at the same time?
Yeah, all of them. I mean, yeah, all the other 7 convictions, they all need to go. And really, this is a battle in a war, and we've won the first battle. I don't see really how the SFO and the prosecution can contest the appeals of the other 7, because none of them should have been convicted, none of us should have been convicted. So,
and are they going to challenge them in the same way? Do you think?
Yeah, from speaking to them and without wanting to sort of, you know, preempt what they might do, I would be very, very, very surprised if they don't.
OK, so that's the conversations you've had. And I know you've also said it's too early for you to say what comes next.
Yeah.
Because you're still, dealing with the news flow, thinking about this decision. Do you have any thoughts about where it goes? I mean, do you have a future in trading, a future in banking? Is that where your aspirations still lie?
I've got friends who, you know, run funds over in Hong Kong and stuff who I might be able to go and work with, whatever. I've got no idea right now. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't quite know my regulatory position, because the last thing I had from the FCA was they tried to ban me for life, and that was stayed by the courts. That should not now go ahead because I've had my conviction overturned. But, you know, I just don't know where I stand from a regulatory point of view, certainly in this country, even though actually the Japanese regulator where I worked didn't actually sanction me on any basis. So it's all a little confused at the moment, I would say.
Are you looking to get to the bottom of that, about where you are allowed to work? You mentioned Hong Kong. Are you looking to get some sort of resolution? Because maybe that sounds interesting, to stick in the financial services sector.
I don't know. I've worked out in Asia for a long time, in Japan. And, you know, I need to really sit down and have a think, because I've been out of the markets for 15 years, and that is basically a lifetime. You know, I talk to my friends who are still in the markets, and they tell me things that, you know, I just think, wow, I didn't even know that, I didn't know that, I didn't know that. I mean, markets move so fast, and we've gone from, you know, from what I understand, is a lot more automated market making, algorithmic stuff than it was back in my day, when Microsoft Excel was king, you know. So
it's changed a lot.
Yeah, I would need to catch up. Yeah.
You've been through so much in the last 10 years, 15 years even, Tom. Do you ever wish that, I mean, you changed your plea early on in the process that might have led you to go to prison for less time? Do you ever look back and think, maybe I should have not done that and played it differently, and this would have been over a lot sooner?
I mean, it's a thought process I've had a lot, because I was on a cooperation programme which would have entailed me giving evidence against my co-defendants and pleading guilty, and I did that, and I made false confessions in respect to that to avoid a 200-year indictment and extradition to the US, which ironically I would have been better doing, because I would have been exonerated at a far earlier date. But I don't regret that decision, because it was a contributory factor in all my co-defendants getting acquitted at a separate trial. If I'd had to lie about those guys and they'd gone to prison, I don't think I could have lived with that. So, you know, when I was in prison, I felt like I was doing 1 year for each of my co-defendants. It also meant I was in a conspiracy of one to manipulate a rate that I didn't even choose. So it made it sort of a bit even more nonsensical.
Do you feel, you use the word exoneration there, do you feel exonerated by what happened in the Supreme Court yesterday? I mean, clearly the conviction has been quashed, so that's, you know, victory. But in terms of the language that they use and some of the wording, do you feel exonerated? I
do, because the issue in our case was falsity was never put to the jury, and we never put rates forward as submissions or asked for rates to be submitted that were false. You know, were they commercially influenced? Yes. You know, we can have a morality trial about that. That was a system. The benchmarks were set up by the banks for the banks. Every bank had, you know, a commercial interest in the rate that it submitted. Every trader who submitted a rate traded products that was attached to the rate. The whole thing was just badly set up. And it's all very well after the event 10 years later to say, well, we don't like the look of this and somebody's got to go to prison for it. But no one lied. And people talk to me about, oh, what about your managers and this, that and the other? But I'm not running a Nuremberg defence. My managers shouldn't go to prison either. I mean, because nobody lied about the rates. I mean, you know, they were all rates that were offered and you could borrow at. So what would you do? Roll a dice? You know, toss a coin? Or just say, well, I've got a fiduciary duty to my employer to do the best for them.
And has this whole thing left us with quite a lot of grey area, I suppose, is my question, Tom? Because what the jury said, what the Supreme Court said yesterday is that in each case there was ample evidence, and you know these words, on which a jury properly directed could have found the appellant guilty of conspiracy to defraud, but the jury was not properly directed. So the judge should have left the jury to decide, but he didn't, and so now we don't know what the jury would have decided. Would you have hoped for something that was a bit less grey?
No, I think that's fine. I mean, because we made commercial requests, and if the jury had taken the inference that commercial requests was in some way false, they could have convicted us. But the other evidence points squarely away from that. The other evidence where I actually say in emails, you know, I don't want something that isn't a true number, is there. And so one thing is I think instructive, which is the fact they haven't sought a retrial, because I sort of actually wanted a retrial, to be honest, a retrial with fair directions and a whole load of things that happened in my trial beyond that, including people who subsequently changed their evidence, unqualified experts, which the prosecution knowingly instructed and paid £400,000 to. All of those things would not be in another trial. And so I think they're perfectly entitled to say that there was ample evidence because there were lots of requests. And how the jury interpreted the requests would have been up to them.
Yeah, and the SFO has said that no retrial will take place, as you say, because it's not in the public interest. So, will you consider taking other legal action, Tom? Is that something you're exploring, talking to lawyers about?
I've had so many lawyers in my life for the last 13 years, and I've still got lots of lawyers in my life. There are discussions about what avenues are open to me in that regard. I mean, certainly in the US, the guys who were exonerated by the Second Circuit in the US, they all took their former employer banks on a civil basis, and there's been settlements reached in all of those cases. So I don't know. I mean, look, I'd just best to leave it to the lawyers. That's the go-to words of my last 13 years. Yeah,
and stepping back from what you've been through, Tom, and what the industry has been through, I suppose, because it isn't just you, it's others. And as we've just discussed, there's still this. Maybe there's too much grey, although you say it's fine. I mean, what lessons should we take? This was all post-GFC. This was a very heated political environment where people wanted answers and people wanted somebody to pay a price for what had happened. That's the context in which this took place, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, we were vilified. All bankers were vilified. It was ridiculous. If you look at this, you know, the so-called FX fixing scandal, you've now got 0 convictions on the back of that. Soon, hopefully, we'll have 0 convictions globally because of Libor. You know, we were scapegoated. We were accused of causing the global financial crisis, which we had nothing to do with. How, you know, Japanese yen Libor moving around by 1/1000th of a percentage point had anything to do with the global financial crisis is completely beyond me. But the narrative that was driven and the false narrative that's been so hard to turn around from a public perspective, not necessarily in the markets. Anyone in the markets generally knew this was just, you know, ridiculous. Because anyone who's traded in the cash markets knows that you've got a number of offers and you can choose one of those offers. And, you know, like, the mechanism for choosing them isn't prescribed, and actually the banks, the other derivatives traders setting the rates, you know, and it was sort of par for the course to set the most commercial advantageous rates. So I just think that, yeah, we were definitely scapegoated.
Yeah, I mean, you weren't surprised to see the back of Libor then, given what you've been through and how you describe it worked?
Well, actually, the replacement they made immediately after, which is where they placed the submission process, you know, behind the Chinese wall, that person had no idea of the bank's commercial positions, was totally fine. And I don't think they didn't need to move to SOFR, the secured overnight funding rate. I thought that was not necessary, because now you've removed that element of credit, of bank credit, that Libor always carried inherently.
Yeah.
You know, so swap spreads and stuff like that have all sort of disappeared. So I think it's a shame. And it's interesting, you know, Euribor didn't go. They kept Euribor. So
yeah.
I think, obviously, the US wanted to pull their benchmark rate back to the States and set it in the States. So maybe, you know, that had something to do with it.
You sound like a person who's still interested in markets, Tom, to go back to where we started the conversation.
I think they never leave you, do they, really?
It gets in there somehow. Can I just ask you, we've heard talk that somebody might be making a drama out of this. There might be plans to film it in some way, a film or a TV series. Is this something that you've heard about?
Yeah, there's stuff going on in that regard, but yeah, I can't talk about that at the moment. So,
okay. Any thoughts on who might play you?
I don't know. They'd have to be in their early 30s or mid-30s, because it started for me when I was sort of 26, so they'd have to go through from 26 to 46.
Okay.
So I wouldn't mind who played me.